The most dangerous myth we ever bought isn't that love conquers all, it's that finding the one is the moment you finally begin to live. It's a lie. It's the moment, the precise, terrifying instant, you cease to exist as a singular entity. We are taught to chase completion, to seek out the missing piece, the perfect mirror reflection that validates our chaotic internal landscape. We call this destiny. We call it alignment. We call it soulmates. But what is a soulmate, truly? It is not merely a partner. It is a beautiful, necessary predator, a psychological force that consumes the boundaries you spent a lifetime building. Think about the trajectory of your life before them. The sharp edges, the strange, proprietary routines, the deep, dark hobbies that defined your solitary orbit. You were a planet, orbiting a sun only you could see. That was freedom. That was power. Then they arrived. And the gravitational pull was instant. Irresistible. You didn't just share a life. You merged consciousness. You began, slowly, subtly, to trade independence for intimacy. You swapped complexity for comfort. The things you loved, they became our things. The opinions you held, they softened, they blended, they became the agreed-upon consensus of the unit. The unit. The couple. The terrifying, single organism that now requires constant, mutual validation to sustain its artificial sense of wholeness. Where is the I in that equation? Where is the fierce, independent core that once needed nothing but its own curiosity to thrive? It is gone. It didn't evolve. It was sacrificed. It was offered up on the altar of romantic mythology, because we were told, implicitly, universally, that two halves make a whole. We were promised security. We were promised permanence. We were never warned about the cost of that unity. The cost is everything that makes you interesting, everything that makes you, outside the context of them. You stop seeking external stimulation because the universe has narrowed. The world is now filtered through their preferences, their schedule, their emotional bandwidth. You stopped reading that difficult book because they prefer documentaries. You stopped hiking that mountain because they hate early mornings. You stopped arguing passionately about existential dread because it makes them uncomfortable. You didn't compromise. You simply decommissioned the parts of yourself that didn't fit the new relational schema. This isn't love. This is mutual disarmament. This is the calculated, elegant suicide of the self, committed in the name of belonging. And the deeper you fall, the more terrifying the realization becomes. If they left, if this whole edifice crumbled, who would be left to pick up the pieces? Because the person you started as, that person is long dead. Reduced to a ghost, haunting the edges of a relationship you were conditioned to believe was your ultimate achievement. The one. The perfect prison. The greatest trick love ever played, was convincing us that two halves completing a circuit was better than two lights burning brightly, side by side. The prison isn't built with bars, it's built with mirrors. It starts not with sacrifice, but with efficiency. The mechanism is simple, devastatingly effective, and entirely rooted in the primal human terror of being fundamentally alone. We mistake boundary dissolution for true intimacy. We believe that merging two separate identities, two sovereign nations of the self, is the ultimate proof of commitment. But the self, truly defined, is the collection of unique preferences, the history of unshared traumas, the private landscape of future ambitions. It is the internal operating system that runs without external permission. When we find the one, we engage in identity compression. We begin using the collective pronoun not just as linguistic shorthand, but as a cognitive mandate. We want this house. We feel this way about that friend. We decided on that career path. The individual decision-making apparatus is slowly, quietly, outsourced. The self becomes regulated by the partner's gaze. This is the ultimate relational dependency. Your sense of value stops being an internal construct, an inherent, non-negotiable fact, and becomes an external validation loop. If they approve, you are valuable. If they disapprove, you are flawed. The parts of you that cause friction, the parts that require independent management, the parts that demand solitary development, those parts are flagged for decommissioning. We eliminate divergence because divergence is conflict. Conflict threatens stability. And stability, once you have committed the self to the relational structure, becomes the only goal. The alternative, being abandoned, being alone, is now perceived as a catastrophe. So you stop developing interests that exclude them. You stop cultivating friendships they don't share. You stop reading books they might not understand. You stop exploring political ideas that might cause a dinner table argument. The territory shrinks. The payoff is immense, initially. Predictability. Safety. The profound relief of no longer having to perform the daunting, exhausting task of being a whole, functional individual. You have successfully externalized the burden of existence. You split the workload, yes, but you also split the soul. The danger isn't that you become bad, or even boring. The danger is that you become redundant. You become a supporting character in a two-person narrative where the lead roles are constantly merging, constantly overlapping. Your unique function disappears into the generalized function of the collective we. You might still have a job. You might still have friends. But the internal compass, the internal clock, the internal editor, that mechanism is now slave to the master unit. You are not choosing the direction, you are confirming the coordinates. This is the mechanical core of the decay. The self, having surrendered its sovereignty for the sake of permanent belonging, finds itself trapped. It cannot leave, because it forgot how to navigate the world alone. It cannot grow, because growth requires friction, divergence, and the risk of being unloved. And when that fusion is complete, when the self is fully integrated into the relationship structure, that structure becomes your only reality. This is why separation feels like an existential threat. Because it is. You don't just lose a partner, you lose the entire operational system of your life. You look in the mirror and see only the ghost of an assistant, waiting for instructions from the primary consciousness that just walked out the door. You didn't just lose love. You lost yourself, and now, you have to rebuild a person from a memory of dust. A memory you barely trust. This is the cost of seeking completion. This is the price of the one. You paid the price, you accepted the cost. But what if the transaction itself was flawed from the start, a catastrophic misinterpretation of desire? What if the promise of the one was never about finding a person, but about finding an exit? An exit from the terrifying, relentless responsibility of selfhood. We chase absolute certainty. We crave the final answer, the definitive proof that we are worthy of permanence. The relationship becomes a fortified bunker, designed specifically to keep the world's unpredictable, chaotic friction out. But bunkers don't foster life, they merely preserve it. They freeze the conditions, arresting development. And you, my friend, became a relic, perfectly preserved in the amber of mutual adoration. You stopped negotiating with reality. You stopped having to justify your own existence, because your existence was now justified by them. That is the insidious, tranquilizing lie of completion. It tricks the soul into believing the work is finally over. It is never over. The paradox strikes here, sharp and cold. The solution you sought, the ultimate integration, demanded the sacrifice of the very thing that made you valuable in the first place, your singularity. You traded potential for stability. You traded the vast, terrifying ocean of who you could be, for the small, warm, predictable pool of who you are together. You felt safe, yes. You felt whole. But safety is the enemy of evolution. Wholeness is the enemy of ambition. You stopped seeking friction, because friction introduces risk, and risk threatens the structure. You stopped exploring the periphery of your own consciousness, because that exploration might lead you somewhere they could not follow. You shrank yourself. Systematically. Voluntarily. You didn't realize you were creating a closed-loop system, perfectly engineered to sustain only itself, dependent entirely upon the external energy source provided by the other. When you find the one, you stop asking the big questions. You stop challenging your own narrative. You become a settled account, a solved equation. You become predictable, even to yourself. And systems that are solved, systems that require no further input or adaptation, are, by definition, dead systems. They are simply waiting for the inevitable, external shock, the catastrophic failure, to prove they were only ever temporary structures built on the dangerous bedrock of shared, comforting delusion. You didn't find your life's beginning. You found your life's perfect, beautiful, absolute end. And you called it love. You didn't realize that the boundary, the subtle, necessary wall between two selves, was the most critical component. You feared the dissolution of the relationship, but you should have feared the dissolution of the architect. The goal was never fusion. That mythological merging of souls, that romanticized erasure of difference, is the great lie of the modern heart. It is not intimacy. It is a failure of architectural integrity. True love, the kind that survives the static death of comfort, does not seek to solve the other. It seeks only to sustain the tension, the dynamic, terrifying truth of the other. The other is the friction. The other is the mystery. The moment you define them, the moment you believe you have cataloged every thought, every reaction, every potential future, you have stopped seeing them. You have replaced the living, breathing, evolving entity with a perfectly predictable, two-dimensional projection of your own desire. You stop existing because you stop needing to translate. You stop needing to adapt. You stop needing to search. And the universe, we have established, requires perpetual seeking to validate existence itself. The relationship must be built like a bridge, not a single monolithic structure. A bridge requires two distinct, non-overlapping continents. If the land masses merge, the bridge becomes redundant. It becomes just another piece of pavement, unnoticed, untraveled, utterly useless. Your job is not to become their answer. Your job is to remain their question. The space between two people, that chasm of difference, is not a void to be filled. It is sacred geometry. It is the kinetic energy source. It is the only place where true, sustained desire can live, because desire is fueled by the things we cannot yet possess, the parts of them we will never fully grasp. You confuse vulnerability with total, blinding transparency. You think perfect love demands knowing every thought, every history, every shadow. That is not courage. That is the desperate, controlling need for predictability. The elite truth is this: you must cultivate the otherness within yourself. You must intentionally foster the parts of your soul that are unavailable to them, the parts that remain fierce, self-contained, and wholly autonomous. This is the only way to avoid the solved equation. If you are merely a response to their presence, you have no substance when they step away. You become a shadow cast by their light. And shadows, by definition, stop existing the moment the light shifts. Therefore, the only sustainable architecture of love demands radical, intentional separateness. You must be a continent. Solid. Self-sustaining. Let them be a continent. Equally vast. Equally unknowable. The bond is the magnetic pull between those two massive, independent forces, not the sloppy, inevitable collapse of the boundaries. Hold the tension. Cultivate the depth of your own solitude. Demand that they do the same. Be the eternal question. Be the glorious, necessary, unreachable other. That is how you ensure the relationship remains a living system. That is how you stop the dying. That is how you claim the eternal. First, you must exist, entirely for yourself. Then, and only then, can you truly exist with them. We confuse fusion with destiny, don't we? We mistake the slow, gentle suffocation for the ultimate comfort. It feels warm, initially. Like sinking into a perfect bath. But baths eventually go cold. And when they do, you are left with the residue, the faint, dissolving outline of the person you once were. The tragedy isn't the breakup, the betrayal, or the eventual friction. The tragedy is the erasure of the tension that made you interesting in the first place. You shed your edges, your inconvenient sharp corners, the things they initially found so fascinating, because those edges feel like obstacles to unity. You sand yourself down, systematically, intentionally, until you are smooth, compliant, and, critically, unmemorable. What remains is not a soulmate. What remains is a shared shadow. An echo chamber, really. Two people agreeing on the dimensions of their mutual cage, convincing themselves that security is a higher value than personal sovereignty. They look at each other, but they are only seeing a highly edited reflection of their own sacrifices. The self that was supposed to be the gift, the magnificent, terrifying, necessary individual, that self is gone. It died quietly, years ago, smothered under the weight of shared expectations and the silent agreement to prioritize us over I. This is the price of the merger, the ultimate, non-refundable cost, the loss of your own internal mythology. You become a footnote in their story, and they become the dominant chapter in yours. The relationship becomes the entire book, and you are just the binding, necessary, functional, but utterly anonymous. You traded your depth for their approval. You exchanged your vast interior landscape for a smaller, manageable, jointly owned suburban plot. Look closely at the architecture of your devotion. Are you building a sanctuary, or are you constructing a tomb, a monument to the person you stopped being, the moment you decided that existing together meant you no longer needed to exist alone? The fire requires oxygen. The soul requires distance. The relationship requires the relentless, unapologetic maintenance of two distinct, sovereign nations. Anything less is not love. It is simply the slow, gentle, mutual suicide of two people who were once too afraid to stand alone. They sought a shelter, and they built a coffin. The silence settles. The mirror reflects the shared life. But tell me, when you look at the person beside you, are you looking at your beloved, or are you simply staring at the ghost of the magnificent, separate self you surrendered to keep them close?